The Lounge, proudly brought to you by Johnny Walker. Keep walking.
Good evening and welcome to The Lounge. My name is Sakyi-Addo. The Lounge is brought to you by Johnny Walker. Keep walking. And The Lounge is broadcast from the Equator Bar at La Palm Royal Beach Hotel in Accra. 20 years ago, on the 23rd of January, Dr. Daddy Limann passed away at the relatively young age of 64. Dr. Limann was president of Ghana for just under 2.5 years. He'd been elected on the ticket of the People's National Party in a highly competitive poll in 1979, which was a turbulent time in Ghana, yet in what was widely considered one of the freest and fairest elections in Africa. His government was overthrown on New Year's Eve in a coup led by Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings. As President Limann's family, friends and associates commemorate 20 years since his passing, I've invited his children to join me to reflect on his life and share with us their memories of him as a man, husband and father. They're also joined by hiplife icon Reggie Rockstone, who is married into the family. I cannot help but wonder what Daddy Limann would have thought of his medical doctor daughter marrying a guy in dreadlocks. And of course, by the way, I wonder whether any of his children are considering a future in politics. Welcome to The Lounge. So let me begin from the back. So Zilla and Reggie, what would Daddy have said?
That's an interesting question. I really don't know,
Did you think about it? Did you wonder about that?
Yes, I've wondered about it. I've thought about it. Actually, most people think that he probably wouldn't have approved, but he's a man of many surprises. When you think it's going the other way, he'll just surprise you and go the next way. So who is to say?
How's your mom? How's your mom? How's your mom?
She's good. She's doing well.
What did she say when Reggie rang the doorbell?
Let's just say she warmed up to it, and right now it's very warm. Extremely warm.
Reggie's an acquired taste.
So acquired, she cannot do without now.
That's good to know. So, what happened? Why did you end up in the Limann's home?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know who these people that oppose. I need a draft sheet, itemized. Haters, well, in saying all of the above, I think you might be wrong. Reason is my father was a huge fan of her father's, and I don't know if you guys know this, but my pops, he contributed to the campaign via T-shirts. Yes, that were made right there in East Cantonments. So I knew about my in-law before I even became the ultimate. And I know one thing for sure is my father would have been ecstatic about this.
Right.
My father loved that man. He was all about. I was raised by 2 women, and 3 women, and if you can interview all 3, and Dr. Limann's name will come up about how my father felt about him. And my father used to boast about the fact that he could speak so small Hausa. He would show off at every given time. So I think it would have been smooth. Now back to the dreadlocks. All of them got dreadlocks.
I know, right?
Well,
that one, aunties, everybody, a very lovely family. I can't imagine myself in another setting. really. And mind you, I wasn't brought up in the whole family thing. It was just me. You know my pops. It was just me, my father, and whatever happened is how we were rolling. Today, I have like family.
Right.
I'm on TV with family. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful thing. So I learned so much, and they are a tight family, I tell you that.
Excellent. You know what I mean? So let me introduce them. So of course I spoke to Zilla, who's a medical doctor. That's Reggie's wife. So now Reggie, you're Reggie Limann, right?
Well, you know, I don't mind. You know, that name carries some weight. You know what I mean? I guess you're on TV. Yeah.
And then in order of age, there's Lariba, who is walking in shortly.
Yes.
And then there's Baba, who's a medical doctor, right, in the U.S. Then there's Sibi. There's Sibi right there. Then there's Leader.
Yep.
Leader. Then there's Danny. Okay, because there's Zilla, then Salma.
Yes.
Okay, Salma at the back. So Salma, what do you do?
I'm currently working with Cocoa Board, Ghana Cocoa Board.
Okay.
I'm a project coordinator with one of the divisions within
Okay.
the board.
And CB, what do you do?
Well, I'm currently a full-time mom.
Oh, full-time mom.
I'm a full-time mom
Okay.
now, yeah.
How many kids do you
I
have?
have 2 kids.
You have 2 kids. How many kids do you have? Nah, you're not married. Okay.
Still free.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Good. So 7 children.
Yep.
Wow. Anyone planning to beat Daddy?
I think Salma is.
Oh, really?
Until the reality is there.
So it's been 20 years. Do you commemorate this with, is it a happy occasion, seeing as you're all coming together with the rest of the family, you're having a national event as well, or is it a sad occasion? I don't know. You tell me.
It's a happy, sad occasion.
Happy, sad.
Or bittersweet.
Sweet, right, bittersweet.
Celebration. I mean, when he passed away 20 years ago, it was a shock to all of us.
Because he was pretty young,
Right.
like 64, 65.
And regardless of his age, we were really taken unawares because this is a man who had never been sick his entire life, not even a common cold. We'd never seen him have a common cold before. And, after a brief illness, he passed rather suddenly. Some of my siblings didn't even know he was hospitalized at the time. He passed because no one expected that was going to happen. For me, as an older child, it was a time that I thought I had come of age, where I would be able to have the talk with my old man.
Because you're his oldest son.
Right, and I really look forward to my next trip to Ghana when I was going to really sit down and query him about politics and where he's been and what he's done, and even our roots, our own roots, where we're from, and because he was very big on us knowing who our cousins were, uncles. He always made that distinction, you shouldn't call your uncle you shouldn't call your cousin your uncle. You have to know who's who within the family. So I was really looking forward to that, and I felt really robbed, and I'm sure all my siblings did as well. But at the same token, he also encouraged us to see the world. Right. So many of us had already left the country. We're living abroad, doing various things, and that was he always encouraged it. And so we hardly got to meet each other. Or it'd been a long time that we were together as a family. The years after the coup, for us as children, was a glorious time because it brought us together as a family. And we really got to know our father during those years, because up until then he was a working man, and you interacted with him on a father-offspring situation. But in those years that he was at home after the coup, those were the golden years.
Because I actually wanted to find out. Okay, some of you were younger. Zilla, you were a baby when he was president.
Yes.
But maybe Baba, Sibi, and Danny, you were a little older. So do you remember being the first family? Do you recall? What was it like?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Because Baba, myself, and Leader were in Achimota Primary as boarding students. So we might probably not have thought anything big of it, but your mates will make you feel special, that's Limann's daughter, that's the president's daughter, or the president's children. So I think that was just about it. As a family, we were always...
Did you have security?
No.
You didn't?
No, we didn't. No.
So you went to, what about, after school? Of course, you were in boarding school.
Yeah.
But, during the holidays,
Yeah.
when you're around town or went shopping?
We were still kids, so during the holidays, our parents are home at the castle. So we had friends come over. So I guess the lucky friends came over and had a good time at the castle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you lived at the castle?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. I understand the accommodation there is kind of, bachelors, pretty modest. How did you all fit in there?
Cramped is what you understand. Well, I think we were all young, so to us, exactly, it was big space.
Right.
It was big space. I mean, there was I do recall there was a living quarters to the castle. Where
How old were you in 79, Baba?
In 79, oh gee, you had to spring that on me. I was 10 years old.
You were 10, okay.
Yes, I was 10 years old.
Okay, so you all were quite young.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was an overwhelming place, and especially we were little kids. So I'm sure if we went back there today, we would be amazed at probably how.
Have you been? Because now it's a kind of museum, really.
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
Well, maybe it's a good opportunity to make a pilgrimage back.
Maybe.
To those sleeping quarters. Yeah, might be good. I think that'll be a good trip to make. So
Yeah, I know.
I recommend that.
We will.
Okay.
Look into that.
Yeah. So and then there was the coup. Do you remember it? It was New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve is supposed to be a happy day. So do you remember where you were?
I remember the hustle and bustle of the day, and I was wondering what's happening. And Baba said to me, "Oh, there's a coup d'etat." I'm like, "What's that? What's that?" You don't know a coup? I said, "No, I don't."
What drink is that?
I know what drink.
Are we all gonna have some?
And I said, excited. I'm like, "What's that? You don't know what it is?" I said, "No." And he didn't even mind me. He didn't explain it to me. Probably, I don't know. But that's all I can remember of the day. The fact that I asked, "What is a coup?" and he was shocked. I didn't know what a coup was. So that's pretty much I can remember.
And Baba, you knew what a coup was at 10?
I think I did. I think I do recall that morning. Our mother very frantically putting stuff together, our clothing, and we needed to, get out of the castle. I remember that. I'm sure I just repeated the words coup d'etat to her because I'd heard it somewhere. And we ended up at an uncle's place, I believe in this Tessano, right? Yeah. In Tessano. And that was where we had the first radio announcement when Flight Lieutenant Rawlings made his announcement. I distinctly remember part of his speech when he described, the hospitals as mortuaries, graveyards, and things like that. I do remember that. That's always stuck with me because I became a medical doctor, and many years later, I visit Ghana and I go around and that is the same theme I hear, so as far back as 81, he made those statements and probably made it sounded as if it was a premise for his school. And today we're still talking about the same issues. So it makes you wonder, right? What was that all about? If many years later we're still grappling with the very same issues that he proclaimed on the day of the coup.
So of course, even though you were young, you've grown up and I'm sure you've learned about some of the things that happened back then, and 70, that was 81. So this is 30-something years after, almost or thereabouts. What do you think? Do you think that after he was overthrown, then he came home. He was, detained for a while, but now he was available to you. Was that a blessing in some ways for you as children?
Yeah, I have the mic now, so I guess it's time for my voice to be heard. Well, it was now in hindsight, it really was a blessing because, as Baba said, the formative years were busy years for him, first as a diplomat and then later on as a politician, and then as president, it was really busy for him. And even though he was a father, a loving father, you didn't see him that much, and many times, with all the pomp and pageantry that went with being president. But now we suddenly had him at our beck and call, if you liked. Now, it was kind of interesting for us as young children. We didn't really appreciate what we had because essentially our father was a scholar. I'm sure you know the theme of our celebration is celebrating him as Prof. Daddy Limann wrote in his book, as the diplomat, the scholar, the statesperson. But he was essentially a scholar, and one of his first vocations was to be a teacher. And finally, he got a chance to do what he loved doing most. And guess who his pupils or students were? Of course, his children. And so we were taught every discipline, every subject under the sun. And because he was such a strict person, and abhorred wastage of any kind, including time, most of the time we were studying. And he was such an academic that even when he thought it was time to rest, then it was time to learn poetry, or it was time to learn Shakespeare.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was nothing like every moment. He loved poetry, yeah. We learned hundreds, should I say, of poems by heart, some even in French. We had to learn Shakespeare. We had to, recite Shakespeare.
Because he was a Francophile.
Perhaps, that was where the French influence came in, yes. But we would study French, we would study science. I mean, we are here from different disciplines, some of us did science, some of us did arts, but he taught us everything. And all he needed was a night before to study the subject, and the next day he was good to go and teach us, So as growing up kids, you can imagine how kids like to play and all of that. So sometimes we hated the discipline, but it's only now that we are adults and we look back and we realize, oh, what a treasure, he taught us everything. He really exposed us, out there. And it wasn't just also about academics, Our father was a very, very perceptive person, and he also had this kind of, apart from the book knowledge, he also had natural intelligence. So he was someone who was good at studying the stars,
Really?
The sound of birds. Yes, he taught us how to distinguish between the bird chirping that would announce a visitor coming in, or that was a harbinger of bad news, stuff like that.
Announce the rain.
Announce the rain, and stuff like that, So it was really interesting, the kind of things he would open our eyes to that we actually thought was commonplace, but it's only after we went to school, had classmates and stuff, that we realized that our training was actually quite different, not the conventional sort. So as young children, I remember one day telling Sibi, I really wish I was blind because the refrain, as soon as he woke up in the morning, actually he slept very late. This was a habit he picked up as a working person, and even in the castle, Mom will tell you he worked so hard. This is what they say. I don't know whether it's true, but they claimed he worked 23 hours of the day. That means he had only 1 hour to sleep. Our poor mother, she was pretty young then also. I don't know how come Sila was born in the castle and Selma was conceived. I don't know, with 1 hour, I don't know, but obviously whatever he did very well. But
he used that 1 hour very, very well.
Very constructively, And so I remember as kids, we used to love going to Pedrasi Lodge because my mother was advised to send him there to rest. So anytime we're leaving, the older ones, Achimota School, and we headed in that direction, we're always so happy because we would have him to ourselves, So, now having this different dynamic where he has all this time, and as soon as he woke up in the morning, after spending the whole night studying and getting our assignments, writing poetry, out for us to recite by the time he wakes up, as soon as you heard his footsteps, someone would just whisper, Dada is coming, and you actually dive to the nearest book or whatever. And then the first thing he says after having his first sip of tea is, Zula, bring your book. Or bring your book. I mean, bring the book was always bound to come somewhere along the line. So one day I was saying to Sibi, I wish I was blind because I'm tired of all this studying. She was like, are you sure? When one day we are all looking at something, they said, look at that interesting thing. What are you going to see? But now looking back,
I'm sure he would have gotten you Braille.
I'm sure he would have. He would have found a way anyway, But now looking back, we realize how privileged and how blessed we were. The only misgiving I have is that I wonder why he didn't give any of us his brain, because we are not doing badly, as you can tell from our disciplines. But then he was so intelligent. None of us, I think, even took 1/10 of his intelligence.
I can hear Baba saying, "Speak for yourself." Talk for yourself. Your father decided he hadn't had enough, and then in '92 he went back into politics. This time on the ticket of the PNC, but he fared badly. Of course, by then, this would be what? How many? 12 years or something later. So you'd be older. You remember that?
Yep.
And what did you think? What did your mom think? What did everybody think?
Well, I think I'm best positioned to answer this question because I was actually right in the thick of it. So my older siblings were in boarding school, and I was still in primary school. And I remember it was more along the lines of a lot of his peers and colleagues tried to convince him to stand or to run to prove that the coup of 81 was unjustified. So it was more of an obligation, and I don't think he would have readily jumped to the idea of forming a party, but he could not let the country down, and he could not let the people down. So much to our dismay, I guess, he decided he was going to do it because he was bigger than, or it was a bigger calling for him than the family, and he had spent the last 10 odd years with the family, so he gave it a go, but as you said, it wasn't as successful as anyone would have intended. However, I don't think that really bothered him. It was more a case of making his presence known and letting people know he was still around. One thing he always said to us, or to me growing up, was when you held the office of the president, it was the highest office in the country, and you could never do anything else to demean that office. So apart from teaching us, he never got a job. He even didn't go on lecture tours, or a lot of ex-politicians or former politicians go and do speaking tours and stuff like that. He never did any of that because he felt it undermined the office of the president, and this was the one thing he could do that allowed him to either go back to contest for that office or at least try. So for that, we're proud that he did it. Yeah.
You all agree?
Well, we agree, but I beg to differ that he fared badly, because I think in a winner-takes-all society, we tend to think that winning connotes the fact that you are successful, but not necessarily so. I think by the time he got back into forming the PNC, politics had experienced a paradigm shift in this country, and it wasn't really about ideology or policy anymore. There were so many other indices and dynamics that had come into the whole fray, like money and what have you. And I think, what he stood for, the fact that he knew that the odds were against him and yet he did it on principle, I think was something that was worthy of emulation, or it showed the kind of person he was, And even though everybody knew that he didn't really have the finances, he really had to make that case, one that you never give up. And I remember growing up, he used to tell us all the time, Abraham Lincoln stood for elections several times before he won, and it was that indomitable spirit he really wanted to embody. Also, remember that he was overthrown, and as my brother was alluding to earlier on, what was the basis for the coup? If indeed there was, he would have been disqualified one way or the other, because we had seen in the history of this country where people have been disqualified. Actually, how did our father become president? By default, because Imo Igala had been disqualified. You could be disqualified on a whim back in the day, and for somebody who had been overthrown to actually form a political party, stand, against, an incumbent government that had overthrown him, I think it was a statement, that made quite a difference. So for our father, it was never about winning, because if he was, then we would have come out of the castle like every other first family, enjoying all the trappings that went with it. But really, even when we were in the castle, I don't know about the rest, maybe they were older, but so they knew about it. But for us, it was never about you are in power to enjoy. It was never about that. It was always about a life of sacrifice. It was always about a life of, setting an example. So we actually, I personally think that for me, if you had the chance to, resurrect Dr. Limann, our father, and asked him where he felt that he had been successful, it probably would not have been in the castle. It probably would have been those days, and we saw how much, after 10 years of being a teacher, how this effort brought him to life. And he was never disappointed when the results came in and he was third. And by the way, at that time, I think he was one of the most powerful people, because the PNC then became the kingmakers, and in our humble little home, you'll be surprised how much lobbying and groveling was going on, and everybody just wanted him to say, something positive in their favor. So I think he really embodied the spirit of a real statesman, one who sticks it in no matter what, come rain or shine. It wasn't just about about the fact that if you won, then the winner takes all, and if you lost, then you sulk and then come out and not want to contribute to the body politic. And I think for him also being in the race after that, it sort of put everyone else in check, because you realize that he being someone who had been president before, it was important that his demeanor, his whole, the way he carried himself was going to have a reflection on others. And you remember that he never really encouraged violence. He was always a voice of reason. And I think during that period of transition in our country's political history, it was important that we had a statesman like that who, in a subtle way, today he may be an unsung hero, but I think that in a subtle way, he probably is one of the reasons why we have the country as it is today. We didn't go back, we didn't delve back. If today we are not like any other country that has gone back into war and all of that, we shouldn't take these things for granted. I've seen that a lot because I work in the UN. I'm a peacekeeper, and I've seen that, and I've realized that Ghana is blessed, and one of the reasons we are blessed is because we had a shooting star in the person of our father. Not because it's my father, mind you, but because it's the truth. Amen to that. Our big sister is here. Our first, and incidentally, I'm sure you'll notice, the first and the last, they are the ones who are carbon copies of my father. You look at her, and you are looking at Dr. Limann. For those of you who don't know him.
It's true. So, welcome, Lariba.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. So, were you at you recall the swearing-in ceremony when you became president? Were you there?
In 79?
Yes.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, you were not there?
I wasn't there. That was the time I was in Britain.
Okay.
I had just gotten married. I don't think my firstborn was born there. He was born in 79 anyway. He was born in 79, okay. But I wasn't there. But at least I saw a little bit of what his life was before. The time that, go on.
Sorry, go on. No, you go on.
The time that before he actually got into politics was when I was there, and they were all very little.
Did he become a different person after he got into politics?
No, not really. He's always been himself. He's always been himself.
And was he a politician at heart? Did you, when he went, he was a diplomat, PhD in constitutional law, Sorbonne.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a scholar, an academic.
Yeah.
Were you surprised, or were his friends surprised that he went into politics?
Some were, but some weren't. Because in the past, he helped, if my memory serves me right, he helped write the first constitution.
Right.
Yes. So somehow, and also, during the days that I was born, or rather before I was born, he did politics in the local level.
Yes.
So obviously he was a politician.
Right.
Yes.
So he was interested in politics.
Yes, he was interested in politics.
Actually, come to think of it also, he was very young when he became president. He was 45.
That's true. That's true.
Really, he was a young man.
Yes.
And your mother, because again you were older, you and Baba, you're a lot older.
Yeah.
What did your mother think when he plunged full, head on into politics?
Well, she wasn't too happy, but obviously we knew he was the type of man who was so selfless. He felt the country was going in a certain way that shouldn't be. So he's always felt that people should be able to sacrifice. Even if that was how we felt he was going to sacrifice himself, because honestly he was a man who lived a very simple life. He didn't want for much.
Yeah. And I know that from the little I experienced, because I visited your house after, when he was a private citizen. And I was actually quite surprised by the modesty of the environment. He was a very pleasant person, very simple. And I did the last interview that he gave
before,
and then I asked him how he was managing, how are you managing financially and so on. He just laughed out and said, how can you worry about me at this age? And that since he was young when his mother died and
very young,
his parents died young, he survived and made it all the way to Sorbonne.
That's
and
true.
became president. How can you worry about me now?
That's very true.
Yeah,
Yes,
very
yes.
simple and straightforward
Yes,
person.
yes.
So
I do remember he wrote and told me about it, you know, and of course, like my mom also protested. You know, obviously you can't force him to do what he doesn't want to do. You know, she didn't like it, but obviously he was able to convince her that that was the best. So I also wrote. Those days, the phones were not that easily available. You know, it was letter. You either wrote a letter or you made a call. You know, so I wrote a letter, which obviously took a long time before it got here. But I asked why was he going to, you know, sacrifice himself in that manner. And he told me, if not him, then who? You know, because it has come that the mantle has fallen onto him. You know, obviously, in the beginning, he wasn't thinking to stand as a president. He wanted to go and serve his people in the remote areas. You know, the Sisala land, he wanted to stand as an MP there. You know, so suddenly this vacancy fell and the mantle fell onto his lap. So he felt that there was nothing else to do but to do it. You know, I felt that at least we were comfortable in our own little way, you know, as not a politician, but as a diplomat, you know, but he felt that, no, come what may, if the people need for him to serve them, so be it. And that's what happened.
Before Teshiningwa, you lived at Asalam Down.
Asalam Down, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I drive past that house, and I actually think that it should be one of these places that should be preserved.
That's very true.
You know, it's a simple place on that road where the laundry and the suit makers, Dan Morton, tailors is.
Facing,
I remember that house where you lived before you moved to Teshiningwa Estates. Reggie, did you ever meet him?
You got jokes. No, I didn't. But it's good enough. Look. It's amazing. Yeah.
But I'm sure that you've learned about
plenty,
about him.
And I just learned a whole lot more just now. It's pretty obvious who's going to be political in this family.
That's actually one of the So, is anyone interested in politics?
I think so.
We haven't heard Selma's voice.
Selma.
I'm interested. I don't think anyone is directly interested, but I do believe the mantle will fall on one of us, one very time soon. This in the near future. Sooner or later, it's going to fall on one of us.
Did the camera pick that?
You know. Yeah.
There's a halo on your head, leader. Yeah.
I also saw a documentary. I was driving out, and me and two young brothers, and it was really captivating. We watched this documentary all the way, and these were two young brothers who otherwise wouldn't have really checked about, and we were all glued to. He's right up there with, the Malcolms, the Martins, it's just.
So this was a documentary about him?
Yes, about him.
Okay.
And it was just amazing. Yeah, everyone, testimonies were given. His friends spoke about him. And it was just amazing. Like, I'm in the thick, but to hear it from other people.
Right.
It's just
so
amazing.
I take it that this documentary will be shown on the anniversary at the event.
I don't know about this, but it's
Maybe it's time to just tell us what you're going to do next week to commemorate the 20 years of his passing.
Okay, so it's on Tuesday, 23rd. It starts at 3. And as leader said, we are celebrating him along the themes or along the theme of our Diamond Stars book, which is the diplomat, the scholar, the statesman. And actually, leader is actually largely responsible for putting it together. She put together a unique, I like to say a unique event, because it's not really a memorial service, it's not a lecture, it's just a combination of everything. And it's to bring to light who our father was after 20 years. I mean, as Baba said, bittersweet memories. So to bring to light him along these perspectives. We would have different people speaking about him, you know, and I think you'll be one of them, won't you?
I think so. I've been instructed.
Yeah, I think basically that's about it. And then there will be the highlight where we would launch a foundation. A foundation we set it up a long time ago, but as you see, most of us are all over the place, and 20 years down the line, it's time to really come together and do the needful. And so the plan is to launch this foundation and to get it going and to spread and promote his ideals. You know, all that we've spoken about, you know, it's time to share with the rest. And so that's what the foundation will do. The plan also is that for this year, and obviously more years to come, we would be celebrating him. So this year we would have a series of events. Others that would have lectures, would do things. You know, there's a Daddy Limann school in my hometown. We plan to do something with them. We have the Daddy Limann hall, you know, and other things that we are still cooking up. We have a whole year to do a whole lot of things. And so I don't know if I missed anything. Salma. Leader.
Yeah.
Roger that.
Who would Dr. Limann have voted for if he were alive and voting in the last election?
Wow, what a question. A good one too.
You've got one.
Very good
You've
one.
got a question. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, in the last election. So, yeah. You don't know.
Oh, come on, guys.
But his party, the PNC, had a candidate, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
The candidate was Dr. Edward Mahama.
Yeah,
yes.
this year.
Who basically took the mantle from him. He was contesting for the fourth or fifth time.
Yeah.
You're not sure. You don't know whether your father would have voted for him.
No, the last election was Edward Mahama. I don't think it was.
He was.
Yeah.
He did, yeah, he came back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
the
Very last election.
Yeah, yes, there you go. Okay, the very last one.
Well, I think that I would. It's very difficult to speculate on who you would
Right.
vote for, but because he fathered the PNC, and if he were alive, I would like to think that the PNC would have conformed to his idea of what politics should be, and I would imagine that he would have given the PNC his vote, because
Right.
if you're not going to support your baby, then who will?
Right. Before Dr. Edward Mahama, in the previous election, the candidate was Ayariga. Would he have been the candidate if your father was alive?
These are really good questions.
I know. Deep questions.
I'm just saying. Very good question.
The family is asking you to answer that question.
I'm loving this. I guess it's pretty much along the same lines that you just said. No? So, assuming.
Right.
You know, because he's not here. So,
Right.
I guess it makes sense. Am I wrong?
The question is, if he were alive, would Mr. Ayariga
We have been the
won
candidate.
nomination?
Yeah.
I don't know that would have transpired.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But in the same vein, if he were alive and he endorsed Mr. Ayariga, he would have voted for Mr. Ayariga. I would
Right.
think that because-
Do you all vote PNC? Or do you vote your mind, your choice, as you wish? You vote PNC?
I vote PNC all the way,
All the time?
all the time.
Okay. All right, that's
Sister Lariba.
Lariba, sorry. Still trying to get my, to remember all the names. Yes,
I'm in-
Lariba, that's Lariba number one.
I'm in
The
print.
first one. Mhm.
I'm in print and newspapers for PNC. I didn't see none of y'all. Yeah. Me and you.
Danny, you were not here. You were not here. Have you voted? You voted in previous elections?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I voted for PNC.
You did? Okay.
I've never been around for an election.
Okay, all right. So you get a pass. Zilla?
I don't know whether to lie
You
or
don't?
say the truth. I
It's
don't
entirely
vote.
up to you. If you
So,
wanna,
it's very shameful, I know, but I didn't register.
you didn't register.
Yes, but I would have voted for PNC.
Okay, I guess
all the
you're
way.
busy thinking of patients. That's okay. Or Reggie, you're thinking of Reggie.
I wasn't in the country for the last election, but if I was, I would always vote the PNC, even if I was the only one. I would vote PNC any day.
Okay. Salma?
I always like to keep my vote a secret.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You're already a politician.
And I wasn't in the country, thankfully. If I was, I would have.
You would have voted PNC. Okay. What do you think of Ghana, of your father's Ghana? For you, especially for those of you that go out, you come back, you see it differently. Is Ghana heading in the right direction? How's Ghana doing? You think, Baba?
Well, I think Ghana is definitely a lot different from what it was 20 years ago. I think it's headed in the right direction. But I think there's still a lot of ground that we need to cover. Living in the West and trying to, my expectations are probably higher. I would like to see standards rise. Having said that, I would admit that, it is quite frustrating at times, when I'm at home, to find out that, the simple necessities are still considered luxuries here, 50 plus years after independence. And again, many, many years after, coups were made for these same reasons, and we're still talking about the same issues today. So it makes you wonder, and as a Ghanaian, and I think as a concerned citizen, I'm frustrated and almost angered by it. I think we need to demand more of our leaders. Our leaders are accountable to us because we, the people, constitute the government. It's not the government that constitutes the government because we elect.
That constitute the people.
Exactly. So, and I'd like to see that everyone is, holds our leaders accountable for that. Our father was a history buff, and he truly believed that you could not go into the future without examining the past. If you did not know your past, then you did not know where you were headed. So, I think we need to learn from our past and not keep making the same old mistakes.
So, so you all are members of the PNC, and what do you make of the state of your party? It did poorly in the last election. They are handing the mic to you, leader.
I guess that is why we know that the mantle will fall on one of us soon, because our father put in a lot into the party, and the vision he had for the party is not what we see today. And we all know that one of us would have to, step up. And then, but I guess it's the beginning, as the last said earlier, the launch of the foundation, remembering him. I mean, the anniversary coming up, the celebration on Tuesday is actually to remind people of Ghanaians, because his name seems to be disappearing, and he did so much in a very short time. And he had a lot of vision for the country. So maybe to bring the vision to light through the foundation, and probably through the next member of family who is going to take up the mantle. So I'll pass it on to the person, the potential.
It's interesting you made a point. You said his name seems to be disappearing, and you have to ask. We have to ask ourselves why does his name seem to be disappearing? Because as Ghanaians, why do we not know our history? I mean, you can meet teenagers today who don't recognize the name Limann. Mm-hmm. So obviously they are either not well educated, or they just can't find anything about the man. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that after the 81 coup, there probably was a systematic purge of the system, because up until a few years ago, students who wanted to write on the subject could barely find any material pertaining to his presidency, to himself, and I believe that was one of the reasons, the impetus for Professor Adamen's book, because he thought he had had, it was a recurring theme with students that they couldn't find any material on that era. So he thought it was his duty, being he was intimately involved in that era, to at least set the record straight And he went about writing this book. We did not commission him to do it. He, as a dutiful Ghanaian, he thought it was his duty to remind Ghanaians of, what they had lost. Because at the end of it all, I think Ghanaians should be angry and should be asking, why have we lost that part of our heritage? And if we don't ask those questions, then where are we really headed?
So you feel that, so Ghanaians have, do you think that we haven't served your father's memory well?
You're saying yes, as in yes.
Yes.
Well, I would say that, and perhaps not just him, to be very fair. I mean, I think we haven't served past leaders particularly well, and he just happens to be one of them. And I think that of all of them, he probably has been the greatest victim because, like my brother said, actually this was confirmed by the professor when he was launching his book. He did say that,
Professor Diamond,
yes, if you were at the book launch, he did say that when he was trying to get material for the book, there just seemed to be, it couldn't have been a series of coincidences. It was just bizarre. How do you go to the library and you just find the period that he was president, you couldn't find newspapers, nothing, So there seemed to have been a conscious, effort to get rid of his memory. And I don't think that Ghanaians have served him well in the sense that he's also been perhaps one of the most misunderstood. I mean, I've heard people who don't know who we are say things like, my father was privy to the coup d'etat that ousted him and was even a part of it. I mean, and he used to say back in the day, who in their right mind would, want, what I mean? And people have never really taken time out to sit down and understand what he stood for, understand the sacrifices that he made. The fact that, whether we like it or not, he probably was the most selfless leader. I mean, it's difficult to have indicators, but the fact that my parents went in as upper middle class people, they were okay. My father was a diplomat, for crying out loud. And yet, my mom will be very happy if we said this on the record, that in the later years, apart from the fact that she was the sole breadwinner, we lived on the charity of friends. And she's always very particular about the fact that we ought to be grateful to those who stuck with us, those who helped us along the way, because we couldn't have done it on our own, Yes.
She was trying to manage with her tie-dye
With her tie-dye. And I mean, as you know, tie-and-dye is really difficult work. And we are proud now to say that, after we had an academic father who really grilled us, we also had a tie-and-dye mother, and we were her labor force, and it back in the day, it seemed pretty embarrassing for us. We're from our first family, and now you have to do intensive hard labor like this, But now looking back on hindsight, it's one of, I think on my CV, this is what I'm most proud of, the fact that, I did tie and dye, and we still do, by the way. I mean, I don't live here anymore. All of us don't, but somehow she's a very smart.
She still does.
She makes sure that our coming home coincides with one session of tie and dye, because she must still get her free labor force, And we all have our positions. And everybody had their. I was a good washer. Some are good mixers. Some are, we all have what we did. Some are ironers,
the assembly plant.
Yeah, and
the assembly
their
line.
own children, So if you were not studying, you were doing tie and dye or something like that, And I think that these are things that we need to encourage the youth about. These are things that we need to talk about and celebrate, And yet we have seen over the years how, I don't want to point fingers or sound like, I'm being judgmental, but we have seen a situation where the country has gotten to a stage where you're only respected if you are rich, if you came out with so much and all of that. And really, that is probably what has accounted for so much corruption, not just in Ghana, but all over the continent, and it has become such a menace, that we can't seem to deal with.
I mean, a couple of things that happened after, during the years after the coup, when he was a private citizen, was the pickup that he drove.
That pickup.
And it would break down, right? Then your house caught fire.
And then even before the pickup was the stroke 8.
Yes.
The famous the stroke 8. So Sister Laraba will best know about that, which was his Benz car that he bought in Geneva.
Oh.
And that was the Benz car he used until he got the pickup. So I remember when he even passed on, my mom said, I wish we could bury him in this Benz car. But my mother sort of inherited it. It became, that was what she used after she did the tie and dye to go around, selling the tie and dye to banks and what have you. And for people who had been the first family, to fall from grace to grass, if you like, and do it with such, class, if you like,
with
such,
and do it with grace.
Yeah, with grace, if you like. I mean, I think that is perhaps the best legacy that they could have left for Ghanaians. But somehow people don't seem to see that, and people really thought he was too power drunk when he sought to go back into politics. They thought, oh, he wanted to go back to get, I don't know. But people had all these funny, misconceptions. Meanwhile, we were not very happy about it because we knew it was more of a life of sacrifice. And really, I think my father's last, talk to us as a family, he called us as a family to tell us that, I was never really meant to be a politician. This was all a calling to serve humanity. I had to sacrifice my life. If I had my way, I would have been a scholar.
So he did this. So he called all of you together and...
Because we were protesting, actually. We were really upset. I think it was in 96, when we were not sure whether he was going to stand again,
Right.
And we just had to approach him and tell him, please, we can't take this anymore. What is this bringing home? And we had the brunt of all the jokes and people think you're power drunk and what have you. And he really called us and had that talk. And I remember, for me, that was when I had a turning point in my life. It touched me to the core when I heard my father talk like that and say, it was never my wish to be a politician, but some of us really had to sacrifice ourselves. And if you, my children, don't seem to understand the fact that I had to do this to save humanity, then maybe I really failed after all, because if you guys are not, with me in this, then how would the ordinary Ghanaian understand that I'm not doing this for myself, for my publicity, my fame, or anything, but just to save the, the ordinary, Ghanaian? And it made such a difference in our lives.
Did he ever talk about President Rawlings?
Actually, thinking back, he didn't say too much about him. But in the early days, he's always lamenting that he thought Rawlings was a confused person. He felt sorry for him because he thought this was a guy who needed guidance. That was his mind. But whatever followed later was another thing. But that was how he saw Rawlings to be a young man who was confused in the mind. That's how he's always put it.
So he was not angry with him. He was not bitter
I
about
don't think he was angry,
right.
Directly to him. But he just
Sure. Sorry, go on.
But he just felt maybe Ghanaians were a bit too. I don't know what the word to use, but I think that maybe he just felt that we could be fooled so easily, and we can't see through people. But right from the beginning, he just, the little interaction he had with him, he saw him to be a confused person. So maybe with all those little times that he tried to talk to him was when people started thinking that maybe he was dealing with him.
Right.
Yes.
What about yourselves? Have you met Rawlings? What do you
Baba did.
You did?
You did?
You did?
Oh, right. Well, they're alluding to at the time of his death, when we had to officially inform the government. I was part of the delegation that met Jerry Rawlings. He was president at the time. That was the first time I met him, and I didn't say much. He came across as a populist leader. He speaks forcefully. He's dramatic in his speech, and perhaps that is why Ghanaians are so accepting of what he says, because some would say Nigerians will call us timid. Nigerians call Ghanaians timid people. Nigerians, on the other hand, tend to be aggressive. They meet fire with fire. So perhaps that's why he did well. But I think, like my sister just pointed out, he clearly would have thought that Jerry Rawlings was very misguided in his belief and plans. Of course, he himself, Jerry Rawlings, probably grew in the job, and I would like to think that he became a better person for it all. But back to your original question, I never heard my father express remorse for getting into politics, nor did I ever hear him speak badly of anybody. He never did that. That was not his nature. It was never his nature. If anything at all, I think the thing he missed the most was his friends, who, by virtue of association, some of whom were persecuted, so had to stay away. And these were people that these were lifelong friends. And for those who knew our father, loyalty was everything to him. I mean, if he called you a friend, you were a friend. If he gave you his word, he'd given you his word. You know, so I think more than anything else, I think it was the friendships, people who took away their friendships, that he missed the most. But you know, he had a household full of children to school, so that kept him busy.
Thanks, Reggie. Thank you, Lariba. Thanks, Baba. Thanks, Sibi, Lida, Dani, Zilla, Salma.
Thank you too.
I'm Kweku Sakyi-Addo. See you next week. Good night.